Welcome to CivilNet. My guest today from London, England, is Rafi Sarkisyan, who is a long-time activist in Armenian community work in London, in the UK. Rafi, thanks for joining us.
Pleasure.
Rafi, as long as I've known you, and I've known you for a very long time, I won't mention how many years,
Yes.
You have been active. You've been active in the ANC, you've been active in London Armenian community events, and you've been active not just within the community, but also in trying to impact politics in the UK regarding Armenia and Armenians. Would you say that the nature of that work has changed over the years?
Not necessarily. The nature hasn't changed, but the intensity goes up and down. And that creates sometimes a bit of gaps in how we influence the public and influence the politicians. So that is the key issue. The important element is to have continuity and to broaden the influence, the sphere of the influence, and therefore be more effective. And that is at least my current intentions, to continue at a pace that we can sustain, and especially prepare for the next year, which is the centenary of the Armenian genocide, and influence as much of the politicians and the journalists and the public as possible. We have come up with quite an elaborate plan, and hopefully we'll move on to the practical aspects.
You know, I don't know if you've become cynical in your middle age. I have. And I always wonder about our efforts in countries like the UK, like the US, like France, like Germany, where systems are so ingrained and politics are so structured to meet, as they should, their country's national interests. How do you have impact in a country like the UK, especially given British Petroleum and Azerbaijan, especially given Great Britain-Turkey relations? How do you have impact?
It's a very important question, certainly. The important facts that we consider nowadays is that how much do we know about, for example, the Foreign Office? How much do we know about their stand as far as the Armenian issue is concerned? And at the same time, are we pursuing the right direction to achieve the objectives that we want? Because barking up the wrong tree is always going to be a waste of time. So that is a key element that we've considered. The next point that we're now addressing, and therefore hopefully will manage to pull more interested individuals in, is to use the British mentality rather than the Armenian mentality to deal with issues. And one interesting practice that we had was the commemoration evening of the Armenian genocide. We had someone that has grown up in England and talks like an Englishman, etc., to convey the message of the Centenary Committee. And I particularly wanted him to do it because I've done it for years and I know someone else can do it better. And he stood up and spoke very nicely. And the first message that we got, very interestingly, all the younger Armenians, who were mostly Armenians, welcomed the message. They were really excited. And they said, oh, finally someone that talked the same language that we did. So that, I think, is a good parallel to use in talking to the other side, which will be the British community or the British politicians. That is a critical element. We've practiced and we've tried several times to see whether we can influence the higher echelon of the politics, which is the Prime Minister and the Foreign Office, etc. And we always get the same response, and we did this time as well. But we won't give up. We will pursue the same issue, but this time we'll approach it in a different way. And we also try to now raise the level of the attention to what we have to say by bringing more key players in, like Jeffrey Robertson QC, who's been far more active recently in the Armenian aspects and the genocide and the Karabakh issue, or Robert Fisk, etc., that have public interest and public will listen to them. We've already have agreements with them that next year they'll be part of our program.
Your game also has been affected by the fact that where you used to be the only game in town, now there's a huge Azerbaijani lobby. It may not be a community lobby, it may be government money lobby,
Definitely.
but it's a lobby nevertheless. So how has that affected what you do as a community?
Well, first of all, it's raised our awareness to start with. The second element is that the Azeri or the Turkish approach is certainly directed from the government. It's very objective. It's to some extent influential. I wouldn't agree that it's highly influential. They do go beyond their means, and you would probably know that they have their center next to Chatham House and so on and so forth, in order to achieve what they want in their, let's say, effort to pacify the Armenian moves. But a good example, which goes back some time, and that was the 95th anniversary of the Armenian genocide, the 90th, anniversary of the Armenian genocide. We had a conference at Nottingham Trent University, and we presented our papers. They sent someone to put the Turkish view. Later on, at Edinburgh Council, we put the motion in for a resolution on recognition of the Armenian genocide, and we succeeded, despite a huge effort from the embassy and the Turkish lobby to block it. We succeeded. We moved back and continued with our other plans. The following year, they approached the council again, trying to
undo,
basically nullify what we had done before. And the council, without our involvement, sent them back saying that you need to go and talk to Armenians. So we have made some progress, although it hasn't been in British establishment, it has been in the Scottish. But still, it's an influence and it can spread. And we have a similar program. The Ealing Council has also acknowledged, so we would hopefully expand on that. But more importantly, what we want to now concentrate on is to make sure that the public is educated about the Armenian genocide, and also people at the Foreign Office and the key players are also aware of what actually has happened, and partly are aware, although they don't entertain it. The other direction that we also pursue is to make our efforts as much a political kind of a move rather than just a request or demand. And through that, then hopefully we can get a better influence or a better outcome.
Armenia. You've mentioned Gharabagh, you've said genocide. Is Armenia on your agenda? That's a common complaint in Armenia, that the diaspora, lots of genocide, some Gharabagh, not Armenia enough. Is that fair?
It's a very fair comment, and it's very interesting also, because there are various players in the whole equation of what we understand by saying Armenians and Armenia. For example, and I'll try and make it as relevant as possible. In May, late in May, we had a meeting with a group of Turkish people invited through the Liberal Democrat Party, Friends of Turkey. The objective of the meeting was to discuss possible dialogue between Armenians and Turkish people or Turkish government in order to come to some sort of a resolution as far as the genocide is concerned. Now, without going into details, what was presented at the meeting from the Turkish side was that by the announcement that Erdogan made, we considered as a major step, and now we're waiting for the Armenians to respond by the next step or take the next step. And clearly, very clearly, they made it clear that by saying the Armenian side, they mean the diaspora. So my immediate intrusion and objection was, you cannot forget the fact that you're firstly neighbors with Armenia, secondly, you blockaded the border, and thirdly, Armenia is the legitimate representation of the Armenian people as a government. So what are you asking of the diaspora Armenians? What you really need to do is to approach the government and deal with them, because you're a government, they are a government. And that is a key element, that dividing the Armenian understanding through diaspora and Armenia proper, it's going to be confusing to everyone. We need to speak as one nation and one objective.
And finally, what about diaspora's involvement in Armenia's domestic issues, in its democratic development, economic development? That's the one area that diaspora doesn't seem to want to touch.
I'm not sure if the diaspora doesn't seem to want to touch. Having worked in the UK for a long time and been involved in the community, there's been a lot of efforts from the diaspora that has not been welcomed in Armenia. In some cases, they've had quite a bitter experience, especially those that have tried financially to become a player in Armenia. And Armenia needs to be very serious about these issues. If Armenia doesn't sit down and think about how we can engage with the diaspora, how we can unite in order to achieve an objective as far as Armenia is concerned, we won't have much of a success. And it is definitely time, if it's not late already. So that, at least I could clearly say that the Armenian government and those that are influential in Armenia need to welcome what diaspora has to offer. The second element, which becomes also clear, and 2 days ago I had a meeting with another individual in one of the institutes, is that the Armenian government doesn't appear to engage the talent which is also present in Armenia, let alone in the diaspora, in order to evaluate what exactly should be the next step, what exactly we should be considering, what objective we should pursue as a nation rather than as a country, and how we can help one another, because certainly the diaspora needs the Armenian help and Armenia needs the diaspora help. So those are key issues that we need to address as a nation and be able to come up with a proper solution.
Can't think of a better way to end.
Thank you.
We've been speaking with Rafi Sarkisyan, who's been very active in London Armenian community and political life, part of the Armenian National Committee, heads the Armenian Genocide Centennial Commemoration Committee, and also is part of the Armenian Community Council of the UK. Did I get that right?
That's correct.
Thank you, and thank you for following us on CivilNet.